Hey everyone, and welcome back to another devlog for ModMasks, an action VR game that I'm solo developing. In the last devlog, I worked on programming a variety of environmental objects such as mask spawns, moving platforms, a working cannon, and breakable walls. I also put more work into testing the feel of the player controller by creating a platforming section as well as a climbing section for a potential level. Now, all this work up to this point has been great so far, but we are very much still in the early brainstorming / prototyping stages of this project. All of the items that I created in the last devlog have contributed to my collection of building blocks that I have to design levels with. You may have noticed that in both the valley and cave scenes, there are several large areas of empty space where I intend to have combat scenarios. I intend to fill them up with environmental art such as buildings, cover, boxes, structures, etc. But more importantly, the combat needs to be enjoyable. Right now, the scale of these areas are just too big, so when I place enemies in them and try to fight, it just doesn't feel right. I think now is a good time to build a proper sandbox scene to help quickly test different aspects of the game. For those of you that don't know, sandboxes are places in a project that are not typically accessed by the players and are used only for development purposes. Instead of walking all the way across the map to find and test out an item, a sandbox allows the developer a place to quickly access, test, and tweak it. This goes not only for interactable game items, but also enemy AI, basic level design structures, and anything else really. This sandbox is only going to grow over time, so right now I just wanted to get some basics in. Since the main focuses of this game are combat, puzzles, platforming, and climbing, I want to have those areas quickly accessible in the sandbox. For now, I just started with creating a door that leads to combat testing scenarios and another door for combat items. The items room is pretty straightforward for now, as it will just be a place to pick up mask powers to use for the combat scenario testing. In the combat room, this leads to two more doorways. The first is a small room with a single enemy in it. I'm going to be using this room moving forward when working on enemy AI behavior and combat feel. Eventually, I would like to add an enemy spawner to this room so I can switch out enemies within the build and not have to back out to the editor to switch out enemies, but this is fine for now. The second door here is actually a teleporter that will bring you into a sequence of combat encounters. At the end of the last devlog, I got the inspiration to take the combat of the game more in the classic first-person shooter route. Someone I met on Discord sent me a video by Andrew Yoder called The Basics of Classic FPS Combat Encounter Design, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. This was a very well-made video and incredibly informative. I definitely recommend it to anyone who may be interested in learning more about classic first-person shooters like Doom or Quake, and just how much thought is really put into the design. As I intend for all the mask powers to play like guns in terms of rate of fire and cooldowns, I think that starting with creating some of the common building block combat scenarios as mentioned in Andrew Yoder's video would be a good place to start. I'm thinking that I can create my own building block combat encounter designs and fill in the empty gaps of my valley and cave levels with different combinations of them. Of course, this is going to mean I'm going to have to recreate both of those scenes and build them more properly to the scale of these encounter designs, but we already knew that the level scale is what we are trying to determine with this exercise. I started with creating a couple of hallways as this is the first classic FPS combat scenario building block covered in Andrew's video, but the real focus of the step was creating a teleporter system so that I could rapidly run through these combat scenarios with each different mask power to test out how each one performs in each scenario. I am not sure if this teleporter system will be utilized in the main game, but if it is, then I will definitely have to fix this bug where you end up going ham if you attempt to walk through the teleporter while carrying a sword in your hand. Besides the two hallways of different scales, I created two completely empty rooms. I am not sure if the scale of this room is quite correct yet, but the main focus here is to test whether or not physics-based combat feels better or not. In Devlog 3, I mentioned that I made it so that when you slice through an enemy, the colliders are set up as triggers so the sword passes through to attempt to give the main character a sense of strength. However, I received some feedback from others in the VR community that they prefer physics-based combat, so I decided to create both a physics and non-physics-based set of enemies so I could quickly test them out side by side. And I have to say that after the side-by-side testing, I feel like my initial thought of having no collisions may have been the wrong approach, so I would like to thank those who gave their feedback to help steer this in the right direction. I still would like to get some hands-on feedback from others in the future, and this sandbox scene will be perfect for trying out the two different feels side by side. That all being said, I have a feeling that there may still be a place somewhere in the game to link the non-physics combat with the mask power later down the line. Oh, and real quick, if getting involved with early development testing is something you may be interested in, then make sure to join my Discord server where I'll be organizing testing opportunities in the future. A link to the Discord server can be found below in the description of this video. I welcome all to join, as the server is a central place where I am open with my community about my game dev projects, YouTube content, and Twitch streaming schedule. If you are more into gaming, we also do community gaming sessions where we play online games together, like we did this week with Call of Duty Warzone, and in the past with Population 1 for VR. Again, the link to the Discord server can be found in the description below. Now, on the topic of new mask powers, I think it's time to create some new powers other than the red mask fireball power. So far, I've had the fireball power fire pretty rapidly as if it was a submachine gun. I think a rapid rate of fire power like that would actually be better fitting for icicles rather than fire, so I ended up making a blue mask and some cones for now to represent icicles and created a blue mask power. I changed the fireball rate of fire to represent more of a shotgun. So now it has higher damage and a lower rate of fire, where the blue power is a more rapid rate of fire, but not as powerful. Another idea for a mask power I was thinking of is lightning. I created a yellow mask and thought about how the lightning power should behave. I'm thinking that it could have a wide area of effect, but focus more on stunning the enemies rather than actually doing damage, which will actually encourage more swordplay with this power. At this stage, I really just wanted to focus on the stun mechanic and the area of effect, so I ended up just placing the static PNG image of lightning on the semicircle trigger, which the Discord community found to be pretty funny. I look forward to juicing this up later down the road, but we need to make sure it plays well first before spending that kind of time on it. That being said, sometimes when I get the motivation to put in extra hours into my games, I do tend to lean towards the art and polish side of things, as it is a different energy than coding mechanics and level design, but still considered productive progress. There was an evening where I had plans cancelled, so I debated on putting an extra session of work into ModMasks, but ended up deciding I should recharge my batteries and just sit on the couch and watch some YouTube. Well, of course, the YouTube algorithm put a toon shader tutorial into my feed, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. I thought it was interesting because I've not actually worked with shaders yet, and this one is a global toon shader setting. I decided to follow this tutorial and add it into the project to see how it turned out. Since I'm trying to achieve some anime vibes with this game, toon shading may be a good route to go. I enjoy the outlines that my objects have now, but I'm not sure if the shader really works with all the textures or not. It's a bit hard to tell at the moment in the sandbox scene, as there is not a whole lot to judge the effects off of, but I may need to change up the enemy textures down the line at least, which I consider doing anyways. But please let me know any feedback in the comments if you like this direction or not. After doing a few runs through the combat scenarios I created, they proved good for testing the scenarios out, but I was still trying to figure out if I enjoyed how the mask powers were behaving. After all, I don't want any individual power to feel too overpowered compared to the rest. I decided to make another test scene similar to the sandbox, which I called Endless Mode. This one does have potential to be fleshed out into an actual feature of the game later down the road as a horde mode, but for now, I just want a room with enemies that endlessly spawn and all the available mask powers to use to fight them with. I actually have it so that each time I defeat a wave of enemies, the wave respawns with an additional enemy, so the room keeps getting more and more full after each wave until I eventually die. This has actually been pretty fun to play around with, and I think will be a good testing tool with potential to expand on down the line. I also kept the toon shader in mind when I was looking for textures for this scene. This here is starting to feel like a better scale than before when it comes to combating enemies. There's for sure still more work to be done here, but I feel like this is a good spot to wrap up this devlog, as I would like to give the opportunity for feedback at this point for all things discussed in this devlog. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any suggestions for additional mask powers. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.